What's up, guys? This is Dave Marshall with the RC Marshall YouTube channel, and today we're going to be performing the installation of the Lightburner LED Afterburner kit into the Arrows RC MiG-29 Twin 64mm EDF Jet. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn the notifications on so you're always made aware when we have new videos on the channel. Now let's get started with the installation of the Lightburner Afterburner kit.
All right, what we're looking at here is the contents of what you'll receive when you purchase a Lightburner kit. You're going to get a couple of zip ties that we've got here. You're going to receive a Y adapter. Now this is specific to dual burner units, so it allows us to come out of the output of the controller into two outputs so we can hook up dual burners, which we're going to need for the MiG-29. You get your controller unit, which is a voltage regulator, as well as a brushed speed control. You've got your output for your burner. You've got your input where you connect your power, and you'll see now that's got a balance lead that you connect to the balance connector of your battery. And you've also got a servo style input with the center connector removed. So you've got your signal and your ground. And you also receive your two LED units with the adapters for the outrunner motors. And you do receive two of those for the MiG-29. Now these are 64mm outrunners, so we've got two units, and we'll show the installation of those here in just a moment. Now something that I made up for this particular install in the MiG-29, I've got a female JST Y adapter that I made that goes to one female and one male JST connector. And that's because we're going to tie in to the electrical at the BEC of the MiG-29. And this is going to allow us to tap right into the electrical connector that comes off of the main battery lead that goes out to the ESCs. And one of these will go to the BEC, and the other will go to the Lightburner controller. Now, for this video, I've already removed the fan units, which you can see here. We've got our 12-blade 64mm fan unit with the outrunner motor. In the MiG-29, it's a 2840 sized outrunner motor. It is 2280 kV, and you've got the Arrows branding on it. It's actually a pretty nice looking motor. Spins real free, and we're going to go ahead and install the Lightburner adapter onto the motor. Here we've got our outrunner and our outrunner adapter that's included with the Lightburner kit. You can see you've got several openings on the adapter for the Lightburner kit. You've got two smaller slots and then one larger slot. What we're going to do is we're going to line up the larger slot with the three motor wires that come out of the outrunner. So we'll go ahead and slide the adapter over the motor and then slip the adapter down. And what you're going to want to do is get the adapter down over the lower collar of the motor and then just kind of turn it until everything kind of slots in place. And everything now feels pretty good. We've got the teeth, inside those motor slots now. And that allows our motor to spin free inside the adapter, which you can see here. And, what we've got is plenty, with the size of the slots. You've got one big one here, and I'll turn the motor so you can kind of get an idea of how big that slot is. There and there. And you've also got ventilation holes around the top of the Lightburner unit. So it actually does provide ample ventilation for cooling and airflow to get across that motor can, so it's not going to get heated up too bad. The next thing that we're going to do, now that we've got the adapter in place, is we're going to take one of the zip ties that's provided with the kit, and on the adapter that we're not using, what you may be able to see right there along the bottom, so what you're looking at is this area right here. There's a little groove that's just the right size for us to take a zip tie and put it over there to kind of hold the bottom of that adapter around the bottom of the motor. So we're going to go ahead and take our zip tie and put it over that groove. Now that groove area is right over the 3 wires that come out of the motor, so you have to take care not to not to over tighten the zip tie over the motor wires. So we're just going to kind of go over the motor wires. So I'll pass the motor wires down a little bit and then run them back up over the zip tie when I'm done. I apologize if this is kind of hard to see. It shouldn't be, but everything is black here, so it doesn't show up as well as it could. We'll go ahead and put that zip tie on there. And like I said, we're going to go over the top of the motor wires, like you can see here, and down over that groove, and then just tighten it up a little bit. I've got a little zip tie tightener tool here. I'm just going to slide that over there and give it a quick little pull. And that's going to go ahead and tighten up that zip tie and cut the end off. You can find these little tools at Harbor Freight. They're about $10, and it's way easier than trying to tighten it by hand and then getting some cutters in there. This is tightens and cuts all in one little motion, so pretty cool. So that's all we need to do for installing the burner array onto the fan assembly. So you just repeat the process for both fans. You don't actually need to remove them from the airplane, but for the purposes of the video, we've removed it from the airplane so we can get a closer look at what we're doing. So as I was saying, go ahead and repeat this process for your other fan unit, and then we'll go ahead and start doing the reinstallation of the fan unit into the MiG-29. So what I've done here is I've just gone ahead and put a small section of heat shrink tubing over the motor wires, and I've run the wiring going from the LED array, which is right here down the side, into the heat shrink tubing as well, to keep everything nice and clean, going back into the center wiring bay of the MiG-29. So now you can see we've got our LED arrays installed on both fan units, and now we can go ahead and get started installing the fan units back into the airplane and getting the controller wired up. So we're going to go ahead and start reinstalling the fan units into the housing there where the foam is. Now what you'll want to do is you'll want the wires that are coming out of the motor, you'll want those facing towards the top of the airplane. So as we're installing them, they're actually going to be facing down. So we'll do that. We'll kind of slide it in there with the LED array going in first. Get it into position. Go ahead and get our motor wires where they need to be and drop that in place. And it's just one screw on each side on the 64mm unit. So we'll go ahead and reinstall our screws. And I know we didn't show disassembly in this video, but the disassembly is just the opposite of everything I'm doing here. So it's pretty simple. We'll go ahead and install our screws. All right, so now we have both fan units reinstalled. And we'll go ahead and reinstall our fan covers as well. And each fan cover has 2 screws, one forward and one aft by the nozzle. There we go. We've got our fan covers reinstalled now. Now we can go ahead and reconnect the ESC wires to our motor. Now, one of the things that I noted when I was removing the ESC wires is that my red and black were swapped on both motors. So we're just going to reconnect them that same way. So now we've got all of our ESC wires reconnected. We'll go ahead and run our burner wires up to the forward section of this tray. And we'll go ahead and shift over to wiring up the controller and where we're going to put that specifically for the MiG-29 installation, because it's going to be a little different than most of the Lightburner installations, just because of the way that this airplane's put together. And because we're using a voltage regulator on the Lightburner, we don't need to go all the way to the balance leads because we can take the full voltage of the battery, which is what we're going to do. Now, a couple of things that I did when I was building the airplane, I went ahead and ran a Y connector to the throttle, which I've got right here. So that's where we're going to plug in our connector, the servo connector to the Lightburner controller is into a throttle Y connection. So that Y connector will go to your receiver, and one side will go to your ESCs, the other side of that will go to your burner controller. With the MiG-29, what we want to look for is this JST connector that connects the main battery leads going out to the ESCs. This is, kind of wide off. There is a male JST connector that is wide off of the main battery leads, and we're just going to unplug that. So now we've got the power going to our battery eliminator circuit here is now disconnected. So what we're going to do is we're going to tap into this using the JST Y connector that I made, that I showed at the beginning of the video. We're just going to plug that in here. And now we can simply plug the other side of the BEC into the male connector that we have on the Y that I made earlier. We can plug that in here, and that will get power to the BEC circuit. And next, we're going to go ahead and cut off of the Lightburner controller. We're going to cut off the balance connector, and we are going to install a male JST connector that will mate up with this female JST connector that I've got now going directly to the battery. Here we've got the controller, and you can see here I have taken off the balance lead and installed a male JST connector, and then we can plug that male JST connector into the female part of the Y connector that I made for the MiG-29. We'll go ahead and get that plugged in here. All right, so now we've got that plugged in, and that should give us the power that we need. Now we can go ahead and take our servo connector, and we're going to plug that into the Y connector that we've already got installed onto the throttle channel of our receiver. Go ahead and plug that in and just make sure your polarities are correct. The only thing we have to do now is install our the leads going out to the actual light arrays. And what I'm going to do is just plug in the JST Y connector that is provided in the kit. I'm going to go ahead and plug that in. And run that back. And, you know, what we have is we've got a lot of extra cable here. I don't need all that, and I've got, you know, the ability to make new JST connectors. So I'm going to go ahead and install some new JST connectors about right here. And, you know, whenever we're done, I'll show you why I have so much wiring in the wire tray. It's not like this stock. They put all the wiring up in the battery compartment. I didn't want that, so I pulled it back. And when we're done, we'll take a look inside the battery, under the battery cover, you know, and see like why I made that decision. I'd rather have the wiring here rather than up there. It allowed me to get a better installation of the receiver. And so now we just need to, you know, save as much space as we can in this area so we don't have wiring. You know, I'd rather most of the wiring be up here so I still have sufficient cooling on my ESCs. So we're going to go ahead and cut these and put some new JST connectors on them about right here that we can plug in to our Y connector coming off of the light controller. So we've got our new JST connectors installed on the LED arrays. So we'll go ahead and lift the ESCs up out of the way because I want these wires running under the ESCs because there's some ventilation holes in the cover that I want right on top of the ESCs there. So now we've got our two JSTs, and we'll go ahead and connect those to the Y connector coming off of our light controller. There we go. We now have our LEDs arrays hooked up to the controller. We've got the controller hooked up to our receiver, and we've got power to the controller coming from this Y connector. So we'll go ahead and start kind of resituating everything back inside the cavity here. And again, I apologize for things being a little cluttered, but it will all make sense here in a short moment. And just making sure that we're leaving room in the aft part of the cavity for those ESCs to breathe. All right, we'll go ahead and reinstall the cover here, and that's just 4 screws. All right, so now that we have that wiring cover reinstalled, I'm going to go ahead and flip the airplane over, and we're going to take a look inside the battery compartment, just to show, you know, why there's so much wiring in here. I opted to, you know, have a much neater battery compartment in favor of having a little bit of clutter in here under the cover. I wanted to have you know, as much room to install a battery as possible. So let's go ahead and get the airplane flipped over and take a look at that. All right, and up here in the battery compartment, you know, if you've seen one of these as they come out of the box, I mean, they've just got a mess of wires coming up here, and you kind of have to stuff them back in there. And I wanted a little cleaner approach, so I decided to pull all of those wires back into the cavity between your intakes, And I've also removed the XT90 in favor of an EC5. I went ahead and installed, or soldered on an EC5 connection, the trusty AR636 receiver, and this little cable here is going to my bind and program port, so I don't have to mess around with back there. What we're going to do now is go ahead and install a battery, get our transmitter fired up, install a battery, and test out these new Lightburners. We want to make sure both of our motors, since we had our motors disconnected, we're going to make sure that both of them are moving air in the right direction, and it certainly feels like they are. All right, and we're going to go ahead and test out the Lightburners here. And they are working as expected, so we are done with the installation of the Lightburner kit for the Arrows MiG-29.
All right, so a couple of closing thoughts on the Lightburner Afterburner kit for the Arrows RC MiG-29. Number one, when I first heard about the design that was being used for the LED adapter that slips over the motors, I was a little bit concerned and skeptical about how long the print would last, and I still have some concerns there. My first one, which I'm not really concerned about anymore now, having seen the adapter in person, was whether or not the motor was getting adequate ventilation to prevent it from overheating. I can tell you that the motor is certainly getting adequate ventilation, and there's some nice slots and ventilation holes in the back of the adapter that will allow that motor to get sufficient ventilation and keep the motor can cool. One of the things that I am still a little concerned about, and it's only only time will tell, is the residual heat. Now, while the motor is running, you've got the fans there that are going to be blowing, air across both the motor and the 3D printed adapter. Now, that particular material of PLA, while it does secure to the motor just fine, I have some concerns about the residual heat of the motor, because it doesn't cool down instantly once the airplane is back on the ground and you're no longer running the motor. The motor is going to hold some residual heat, and it will dissipate over time. And I have, some concerns over whether or not the residual heat of the motor will cause that PLA to warp over time, because it is in fairly close proximity to the motor. Only time will tell, and I will certainly come back in here and either leave a comment or make a new video should that become a problem in the future. For right now, though, what I can tell you is the motor will stay cool with these adapters on there. And like I said, time will tell whether or not the adapter itself will warp due to residual heat of the motor. The installation of the kit was rather straightforward and pretty simple. You simply install the adapters onto the motors and run the wiring up to the controller, get the controller hooked up into power and connected to the throttle channel of your receiver, and everything should work. Now, as you'll notice during the installation, I took a few liberties of, not necessarily changing the wiring of the kit, but changing how it connects and interfaces with this particular model. On the Arrows MiG-29, the wire that goes back to the dual ESCs, about halfway down that wire, there is a small wire tapped in that has a JST connector on it that goes out to your external UBEC, your battery eliminator circuit. And what I did was I just made a Y connector, that would allow me to power the Lightburner controller off of that same JST connector rather than running the balance lead up into the battery compartment. Now, you can still certainly go the traditional method of running the balance lead into the balance or up into the battery compartment and connecting the balance connector, but this particular airplane, kind of afforded me the ability to kind of bypass that balance connector and just go straight to the battery because of the way that that the Lightburner is using a voltage regulator. It can take the full voltage of the battery and convert it down to the necessary 12 volts that's needed for the actual controller itself. For those of you that have the Arrows MiG-29 or those of you that are looking at it, the amount of room that you have in there for a battery is pretty limited, and I wanted to keep that as clean as possible up under the canopy. Now, one of the other things with the Lightburner kits is, in the instruction manual, it says that the Lightburners need to be calibrated every time you use them. And while that is true, it's not something that I really noticed when I was performing the testing on the LED units. As you're spinning up the airplane, if you take about a half a second, 2 seconds, whatever, 1 second, to kind of slowly bring that throttle up, the LED arrays are going to turn right on, and it's not something that should be a real inconvenience for you. In addition to the Y connector that I made, I also made a couple of other changes, not necessarily to the wiring, but again how it interfaces. I shortened up the leads coming from the actual LED units themselves, and the way I was able to do that is I have a little kit with all of the pins and JST connectors, and I've also got the crimper necessary to do that. You can find those on Amazon if you want to take some of those liberties and get rid of some of that wire clutter as you're installing one of these kits. One of the other things I noticed is that because the LED units are in such close proximity, they're about 2 to 3 inches inside of the exhaust nozzle of the MiG-29. Because they're in such close proximity, the Lightburner arrays are extremely bright. I also got the opportunity to see the Lightburners in action at Jet Jam 2020 in Indiana this past week, and I can tell you that even during the daytime, the LED arrays in the exhaust nozzles were very bright and very easy to see. While there may be some recommendations out there to use like a reflective paint or something like that on the inside of the exhaust nozzles, I really don't know that it's necessary, especially on the MiG-29 kit, because those afterburners, the LED arrays are very bright in the back of that thing. So again, time will tell, and it's certainly up to you when you install them. Are they bright enough? Do you want them to be a little brighter? You can certainly line the interior of the exhaust nozzles with some aluminum foil, or use some reflective paint or something like that to make them, to make that glow a little brighter. But I personally don't think you need it, especially on the Arrows MiG-29. Overall, I like the product. I think that it's, that the way that the adapters fit over the motors is great. I think that there is sufficient cooling. I didn't particularly notice any difference in thrust before and after. And I've got a funny little video that I'll play here, and you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. The first time that I did the test of the Afterburner, well, just take a look at the video and see for yourself what happened. So in that video clip, the first test of the Lightburners that I was doing, I was holding onto the airplane, but wasn't holding onto the camera, and the thrust coming from the EDFs just knocked the whole camera and tripod assembly right onto the floor, which is pretty crazy. I wouldn't worry too much about any loss of thrust. The airplane that I saw running the Lightburner kit at Jet Jam was performing fantastic. Still had great vertical, still had great roll performance, And if there is any loss of thrust, it certainly appears to be negligible at best. That's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you guys for watching the installation of the Lightburner Afterburner kit into the Arrows RC MiG-29. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you're interested in purchasing one of the Lightburner units, check out the description. We're going to have a link to the Lightburner website where you can go and you can purchase any of the kits that they offer. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification icon so you're always made aware when we're releasing new videos here on the channel. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you in the next one.